everyone, and welcome to another Mastermind Roundtable. This subject for today is going to be gaming with kids and teens, and the challenges and the, good things that could happen with that, the difficulties and the kind of rewards from it too. So I'm going to kind of go around. With us today, we have Sarah Zeitman, Evan Colbert. We're going to start with, let's talk a little bit about how most of us, or some of you, I should say, got started GMing for the youth of the nation, as it were. Who wants to talk about their thing first?
I'll start because it's a pretty short and sweet story.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was actually planning to work for a summer camp, and because of COVID, they entirely went online, and they didn't want to be like oh, just goodbye. So they hired me to play D&D for kids, which was actually the first time I got hired to run it, and I was
awesome.
I can get paid to do this, which is sort of the beginning of my story for Mastermind Adventures, but.
Yeah.
I would not call it D&D at all, honestly. It was very pared down. They had two powers that could be whatever they wanted. It was more akin to a powered by the apocalypse system, which I'm sure we can talk about later. But it was really rewarding and fun. And I honestly just made the Shrek movie for them, and they figured that out halfway through the week. It was like each day throughout the week, and they figured out halfway through, and I was very satisfied for that.
That's awesome. That's great. Mariah, you had something you wanted to share?
Yeah, so before I was a teacher, I ran an after-school program in Albany, New York, and a group of the fifth graders would always want to talk to me about what I did over the weekend. I would tell them all about the D&D game I was in, and then one day they were like, "Can we do D&D for Kids' Choice Day?" And I went, "Sure, let's try it." So I ran them a 4th edition D&D adventure.
Wow.
And they absolutely loved it. And I hated running it because I did not like the rules. And
I feel that, girl.
The kids absolutely loved it. And then I started to do a club when I started teaching in Massachusetts. I started a D&D club at one of the schools where I teach. And then I was also at the same time running a kids game for free out of a local game store in Fairhaven. And then the pandemic hit, and I started doing it all online. And this year, now that we're back in school, I'm doing another D&D club after school. We have 3 groups that each group comes a different week, and we've been running the Lost Mine of Fandelver, and they've been really
fun.
enjoying it.
Classic starter module.
Absolutely.
So I also started, the first game that I ran for kids was actually running for Kristen's son, Seth, and his friends. And this was like close to 12 years ago. And I was the first person that introduced them to D&D, and now they all play D&D and Pathfinder, and I'm so proud of them. But that was like, they threw me to the wolves because I had 6 kids. And I didn't know, I only knew how to run a game for adults, and I hadn't been running games for very long. And it was kind of a disaster, but also really awesome. And then after that, like, I started with a whole bunch of other stuff, and pretty much the only groups that I do now are for kids. But like, I GM'd the group that you GM, Mariah, for a little bit. Which is I actually just saw their mom today, and we had a great time talking about all of the stuff they do. We talked about Killian being a half ghost and like just disappearing away from the party,
and then ghosting everybody.
Yes, yeah, it was funny. He's very proud of that. Apparently, I was like, I'm gonna have to talk to him about this because, yeah. So that kind of segues good into our next kind of topic. What did you learn while you were GMing for kids that kind of makes you a better GM? Like, what are the things that, like, the challenges, I guess, of like the kids doing things that kind of taught you how to handle things, even with adults?
So I started as a theater teacher. And so my background was in teaching these rote plays where, everybody had a role, and then we'd rehearse the play and put it on. And then I got like a gig at a summer camp, and I realized like the educational potential of improvisational imaginative role play was so incredibly powerful for young people, because kids have this natural sense of play. It's like how they learn how to do things. It's like a natural instinct that they do. Like they'll pick up a pen and start like playing with it. Mm-hmm. And it's once we get older, it becomes more and more difficult, as you know, we hit adolescence and we want to become cool. And so we need more like rules and structure to make it fun for us as adults. And so for me, I think it was really interesting to see what I had learned as a theater teacher, coming out in all these different ways in terms of like improvisational role play. And so that was really, really exciting.
That's awesome.
The really interesting thing about the science of your brain and how it works, and I guess I should say that I'm a LICSW, I'm a mental health therapist, and I've been doing that for 25 years. And during that time, I've been working with, you know, children, families, and people who are experiencing some pretty hard times. Your brain doesn't know the difference between what you do and what you pretend to do. It learns the skill, whether you are pretending it or whether you are actually practicing it. And that is one of the things that really makes this a powerful tool for kids, is because they don't actually know. They can step out of their life where they're starting to feel you know, judged by their friends and having to fit in, and all of these things are starting to circle around them, and they start losing self-confidence and autonomy and all of these different things. And they can step into the role of some kind of superhero or some kind of action adventurer or whatever, and they can pretend to be that, and they're getting reattached with their senses of self-confidence. They're getting reattached with their senses of being able to make decisions and being successful at doing risk-taking in a really safe way.
Yeah, I think that's like magical about this kind of like play. Like it's really fascinating how it all kind of works together. Like I used to think like I was not a very good like public speaker. I was incredibly shy, and I think through RPGs, like I've gotten more confident in like being myself and like being outspoken and like being forced to be like the party leader or like the bard who has to do all of the talking. Like that made me a better speaker in general. So I mean, I believe that it's the practice actually becomes part of the learning aspect of that. It's awesome.
I think what I've learned most from kids' games, which I think is an important skill in any game you run for any tabletop role-playing game, is the kind of idea of kill your darlings, which basically is the idea that no matter what you set up, you have to be prepared, or at least expect or prepare for them to totally go in a different direction, for them to do your plan in a way you didn't expect. I've had a great experience recently in my Wild Beyond Witchlight game where I have this sort of idea and plan where they're going to peacefully meet the kind of the first witch hag, and they are going to have a conversation with her and try to make a deal with her. But instead, they make some interesting choices and a bad check trying to stop the paladin from opening the door, and they just fall into her like sitting room while she's like gossiping with someone, and she's immediately mad and angry at them and like immediately wants to murder all of them for breaking into her house for no reason. And they have to like use her own rules against her to break out, and I have to like very much do this on the fly, and I'm currently like running 3 separate games at the same time that I was not prepared for. And
yeah, that's
I don't think
definitely.
I could have done that like 4 years ago, but like a lot of the games I've run for kids, I'm like, oh, like this is what we're gonna do, and they're like, I want to go down this river, and I'm like, okay, cool, we got to figure that out, and I've kind of had to lay the tracks. There's this scene in Wallace and Gromit where it's in the Penguin episode where they're
the wrong trousers.
Yeah, the wrong trousers. Thank you.
Wrong trousers.
How dare I not know the name of that episode? All right. But they're like on a little train, a toy train, and Gromit is laying down tracks in front of the train, and like that is what a game should be, which is like you are only laying the story ahead of them that they need to go to not fall off the tracks. You're not
Mhm.
planning anywhere ahead of that, because I always say you can, and I do often plan ahead of that, but be ready to just toss that out.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You know,
I
Arthur-
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just gonna say, I think it's that is true, and also it's really important to recognize that their goals, kids' goals, are not our goals, and we forget sometimes what it's like to be a kid with kid goals, right? And so I think right along the lines of what Arthur was talking about with kind of letting go of your baby, it's also remembering that they've got kid goals, and we need to remember that their goals aren't not going to be our goals necessarily.
You know, and I also think like the ability to just be like, all right, that's not happening anymore, and just scrapping it and moving on quickly, and not, and again, what Arthur was, to echo what Arthur said, not to like hold on to it so tight,
Mhm.
because they're not going to have fun if you're like holding on to like, no, you're supposed to do this. That's not going to be fun for anybody, adults or especially kids. With my Lost Mine of Phandelver game that I ran at that gaming store, they were like in it. They were like, yeah, let's do it. And then they went off in a different direction, again, following, the little trail I left. And then one of the kids went, I really want to help this banshee that's out in the woods because she's clearly miserable. What can I do to help her? And I was like, I had not planned for this. Well, make me a religion check.
Now.
Rolls really well. I'm like, oh, okay. And I had to, look stuff up, and I just made stuff up on the fly. And then gradually that campaign, that's the very basic rule set, turned into a completely different campaign where they didn't even worry about Phandelver anymore. And it just completely organically changed into something else.
Yeah.
And it was magical to be a part of and to watch it happen, because I had played this game for a couple of years with these kids, same group of kids, until the pandemic hit and everything shut down. So it was really cool to see how they were like getting used to playing with each other and getting used to what character concepts they were doing and being very comfortable, and then having it just become something completely different. It went from a structured module to a homebrew that I'll plan some stuff out and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I can share an anecdote from a very recent game. It was just 3 weeks ago, I think. I ran a game for a bunch of teens. They're awesome. I've known them since they were very little. They're mastermind kids. And they were going through this module that I had given them a set of like tarot cards basically, and there was like a secret like hidden demi-plane inside of them, and they figured out how to get in there, and they were trying to get out, and blocking their way was this like blue dragon who was like the tyrant of the realm, and he wanted to like go to the real world and be like a real boy and not just like this creation of this bard that made this world. And they were actively fighting him. Like he was breathing lightning all over them. He was like trying to kill them. And one of the clerics basically was like, I know that you're hurting and you're sad that like, your mom is gone. Basically, the person who created you is gone. And I just want you to know that like, you can have that love again because I love you. And I was like, roll me persuasion. It was like, it's going to be tough, but you can try. And he got a natural 20. And I was like, I can't believe this. I was like, the dragon stops attacking. And he's like, are you serious? Like, what do you mean? You don't love me. You don't even know me. And he's like, no, I do love you. Like that. I've seen your soul. And I love that. I love what's inside of you. And I know you can be a good person. And then he proposed marriage. And I was like, okay. The dragon says yes. Like
that escalated quickly.
What? This is the third marriage of this game. There's three individual players have married 3 individual NPCs on a whim. The warlock married the queen of the Winter Fae. Now this cleric married the dragon. We have another couple. One guy ran off with like this like mage that he had met. It's amazing, and I was like, I guess this is how it ends. You get out because you're marrying the guy. Like, what? And they just had the wedding, and it was an entire session, and they were all like sitting around totally silent on voice while the person, like the kid who proposed marriage, was like reading his wedding. He wrote out his wedding vows. He described to me how he wanted to have the whole wedding. It was amazing. And it wasn't what I had planned. And I was just like, this is great. Like that idea of like thinking on the fly and having to like accommodate some of these like wild imaginations is, I think, one of the greatest things you can learn from this. Because
I think your players speed runned enemies to lovers.
Yeah. Oh,
They really
they do it
did.
all the time. They do. It's amazing. I love it. It's awesome. All three of them are single sex marriages too. The cleric and the dragon are both male. The thief and the wizard are both male, and then the queen of the winter fae and the warlock are both female. And I was like, this is amazing. Like these kids are teaching me so much about just like human nature. It's awesome. But yeah, like I think that I love the idea of like thinking on the fly and like laying the tracks out in front of you as you're going as like the metaphor for just rolling with whatever they're going to throw at you. And the younger the kids are, I think the crazier things you have to deal with.
Oh yes, absolutely.
You know that. Absolutely. I know you know that, Mariah.
Oh, I definitely.
I know the kids you play with. I know how they are.
Even my after school kids, I'm like, okay, this is how it's gonna go.
Yeah,
sick.
Yep.
Let's go.
Cool. Awesome. So this is this kind of actually, we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but what do you guys think is the difference between jamming for like a group of like younger kids versus maybe like teens and then adults and then like mixed group things? Like, do you feel like you have to dumb stuff down for the younger kids, or, you know, what are your opinions, I guess?
Well, in regards to like how like mechanics and stuff, how the mechanics of the game and stuff work, I afford a lot of extra time for kids to like find certain things on their character sheet to click and roll. Running online has made that a lot easier because I can like literally bring up their character sheet and point out where it is, which is cool. But kids make decisions way faster than teens or adults. They will make a choice and stick with it. Meanwhile, I have an adult game where they have been talking in game 4 weeks about what they want to do and then decide what to do. The teens take less time to have the discussion, but they'll at least have a discussion. The kids are like, we're doing this. Yeah, we're doing that. Okay, cool.
I think it's also like a matter of attention span. So if you're working with, I've run games for kids as young as like 3 or 4 before. And obviously, you know, running a game for 4-year-olds is very, very different from running a game for 14-year-olds. Like 14-year-olds have all of these interpersonal dynamics that they want to weave. They want to troll each other. They want to, you know, they have all these different, like all the players have different motivations. Whereas like with 4-year-olds, you never know what you're going to get. And, you know, you have to like, it's always too scary. Oh, well, don't worry. It's going to be okay. It's just pretend, you know? So like, you just, I think it's one of the biggest differences is attention span. You cannot have a 4-hour long fight encounter with a lot of kids. You have to make it quick, you have to make it funny, and you have to make it fluid. Like if the monster has a really high like hit points or whatever, then maybe they don't defeat it. And it's also sometimes more valuable, like you said, to marry the dragon than it is to go murdering it, you know? Yeah. Because in real life, they're going to be working through emotions by talking rather than fighting. So it's probably a more valuable skill anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick, I'll echo what I said in my Witchlight interview, which I think is out now. You can check out on the YouTube channel. But kids, similar to new improvisers in stage improv, don't know what is wrong. So they'll just do a thing. While like I think a lot of experienced people will like, oh well, I gotta check for traps, I gotta do the usual things, and kind of get into a like box of what you're supposed to do in a D&D game, versus like I don't think like a regular person would think, oh, I'm not supposed to kill the dragon, what if I marry him? Like I don't think that's a thing most people would think of, and that's awesome. That makes a much more interesting and dynamic story. And I think yeah, your games can go in a lot of more unexpected places because they haven't been taught what is you're supposed to do.
Yeah, the idea of like them not really knowing the cliches of fantasy, like that I find is a big thing with younger kids. Like the younger they are, the less like the more you can like get away with putting these kind of cliches. Like you can have like, you know, the royal trapped in a tower put there by a dragon, and they'll just go for it because they don't look at that and say that's boring. We've already done that a million times. It's new to them. And I think that's like a valuable thing. You can kind of pull out all of those dumb cliches, and it feels cool sometimes to play those.
The other thing with younger kids versus teenagers is younger kids don't actually care about the mechanics. They only really care about the story. So if you find yourself getting like dug into the mechanics with a younger group, they're not having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the teenagers care so much about the mechanics. And
yeah,
they do.
Yeah.
You'll have
My power
to,
that I got from the dragon means that I can do this, and then they're like angry with you because you're not letting things go their way. It's
Teens are a challenge, yeah. I have never jammed for like a mixed group. It's always been like a homogenous group of like either like under 10-year-olds or like 12 to 17-year-olds or adults. Like I've never done that. So do any of you have like that kind of, I think Arthur and Mariah, you both have done mixed groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done some family games before, and I think family games is some of my favorites, because of the way that they stop being like parent and child and just kind of become peers. It's like really interesting to see happen in front of you.
When I was running games at the store, we had about like 30 kids, so there were a few of us GMs doing that, and a couple of the tables had like kids that were in like elementary school and kids that were in middle school, and one of the tables had middle school and high school kids. And with the tables where it was like middle schoolers with littler kids, it was interesting because if a younger kid was getting stuck on something, the middle schooler would be like, here, let me help you. And they would sit and they would like go over all of it and explain it in a way that I never thought of. And it was really interesting to see that these kids were like, oh, I'm going to help. This is my baby now, and I'm going to help them. It was really adorable to watch because we had a lot of teen boys specifically at the table, but it was like a mixed bag of like elementary kids.
That's great. Like that's kind of teaching them how to be mentors and like
exactly.
That's great.
And I was like, maybe you can run a table. That'd be cool. They were like, maybe I could run a table. And it was really interesting to watch because like we literally had a group of teens, a group of little kids, and then one that was mixed, and that was my group, the one that was mixed. And I was like,
you do the short stick.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, it's fine. But it was really fun to watch them do that. Like it was really cool to see that happen, that they would like pair off and help the kiddo. Yeah,
no, that's great. I mean, that is a skill that kids need. Kids need that kind of leadership and understanding and empathy skills sometimes. Like it's hard to, especially when you're dealing with kids who might not have younger siblings or anything like that, like giving them like the authority to be like a helper, I think is really great. And it does kind of lead into them running their own games. I know that the kids that I play with, they are running their own games now, and they're like, they want me to sit in on the games because they're like, I'm a better GM when you're here. And I was like, you're fine. Like, you're going to be fine. It's okay. But I'll sit in if you want me to. But like, you don't need my help to be a good GM. Like, you're a good GM anyway.
I think the school system sometimes really lets kids down because while a kid may be 9 years old, they may be at a completely different emotional level than another 9-year-old or even a 7-year-old. I mean, kids are varied. And I think by separating everybody by these arbitrary ages, we really lose out on a chance for kids to be mentors and be leaders and be followers and have someone to look up to and take care of them. Yeah. I mean, I remember I was running this class that had like a bunch of 9-year-olds and then one 14-year-old. And this 14-year-old struggled socially with his peers. You know, he was not ready for the teenage class. And we just kept him in with the 9-year-olds because in the 9-year-olds, he was the coolest kid. Like he got to be the god of these other 9-year-old boys. This kid, he was like, his character's name was Dino Slayer. And he would always be like, well, you want to know how I slayed those dinos? With a spoon. And like for the other teenage groups, they were all like edge dark kids, like who were talking about how their whole families were murdered in the steppes by some bad guy. And Dino Slayer, on the other hand, is like, I killed those dragons with a spoon. And so, like, he was just floundering socially with his peers, but he was the coolest kid for the other kids. And I think it was so important for him to have that experience of being looked up to. Mm-hmm. And I think that with mixed age groups, you can really have these moments where kids can shine as mentors and shine as and learn from each other in these interesting ways.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, I think that's really valuable.
I know some kids who I would love to like be in their game and they could be ready to GM now versus some adults where I'm like, maybe you need a few years before you can be a player. You should go back to something.
Yeah. It's a great point.
Last year when we were mostly remote, I was approached by one of the 4th grade teachers saying, hey, this student wants to start a D&D club after school. And I know you play. Do you want to help and just be like another adult that's online with them? And I went, yeah, sure. That sounds great. This game that he was running, it was not a D&D rule system. I think he was just making it up as he went along. And like, we weren't adding modifiers or anything. He was just like, oh, you get this arbitrary modifier for things. And like, it was the most fun game. And I got to play it. I got to be a barbarian in it. And it was so much fun because then he wrangled the other teacher to be in the party as well. And
that's great.
When this year started up, he's in 5th grade now. He was like, Miss Treppis, do you think we can do D&D? I was like, yeah. Do you want to be the dungeon master or do you want to be a player? I think I want to be a player. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going to be teaching everybody. So if it's getting frustrating, I'm happy to have you like co-DM and all that jazz. And he's been having a blast, especially because he got like his whole class last year into it. And now that we're offering it, they were like, wait, we're doing that some more? Yes.
That's awesome.
And
yeah,
it really helped him a lot.
Yeah.
Because when he first started at our school, he was having a hard time like connecting with the other kids. And then last year, because he was in charge and running this game and like being the person that was running the game, a whole bunch of his peers like gravitated and were like, yeah, that's cool. And like, got really into it just because of how passionate he was about it.
Oh, that's great.
And it was so heartwarming to see that happen for him.
I also think starting without a true system, just kind of doing your own thing can really help you like peek behind the curtain of game mechanics. Mm-hmm. Like I have a very like simplified system I run with kids and it doesn't have a health pool. Like you don't have a health bar. And I think some people would look at that and be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, how, and you can still get hurt. You can still like take damage. You could still die in this world. But like, there are a lot of things that we don't have mechanics for that the game is not focusing on. Like Dungeons and Dragons is about high fantasy adventure and dungeon delving. But if like you want to tell a story that's not that, it doesn't work as well for that. And I think if kids start out with literally their own system, they can add or take away whatever they want to tell the story that they want to tell. I think that's
I had a kid run a game for me where everybody was a sentient piece of food. And I played a character. It was like a one-on-one game. So I ran a game for him that was like a high fantasy game. And then he ran a game for me where I was a sentient pizza named Pizza Leo with the power of pizza. And every time I rolled a d20, it was a different pizza that like, and I was exploring this like food world and having to fight donuts. It was absolutely bonkers, but it was so much more fun than some of the some stodgy encounter where I have to go grind and kill every single person in a room. Mm-hmm. Whereas like when I'm playing like the pizza, I'm like, hello, I have a sword made out of cheese. And, like,
yeah, I mean, you can't beat that creativity either. Like, it's kind of like we were saying, like kids will buy into almost anything. Like they're they make decisions very quickly, and they want to do what they want to do. If they want to play a pizza, they're going to play a pizza.
And I hope your sword was named Ex Camembert or something, because that's amazing.
No, it was like a mozzarella stick, and I would like pull it out of the sheath.
Was the sheath made of like the breading?
Yeah, the sheath was the breading. I had it attached. So like most of the time Pizzeria was like a big slice of pepperoni pizza, but then sometimes she would like level up and become an entire pizza, and like she could like if I rolled a nat 1, I would be like nasty, stodgy cafeteria food tray pizza. And then if I rolled a 20, it would be like one of those like pizzas made of gold, you know.
Ooh, gold, amazing.
Like, truffle oil.
So this kind of leads into the kind of the challenge topic that we have, because we're talking a little bit about modifying rules, specifically for younger kids or neurodivergent kids, or just anyone who might have trouble with the more straight-laced rules of like D&D at least. So Arthur, you already talked a little bit about that, but does anyone else have any other like kind of things they did to modify rules? Or
I think one of the things that I try to keep in mind, or that's really helpful for me, is just the idea that the younger or more neurodivergent or more there are groups of people where the rules actually they get in the storytelling and the fun, right? Mm-hmm. So you are kind of like a magician sitting in the background, and you can pull anything and it's going to make it more interesting. I think a lot of people try to rely on the rules to get control when they feel like they're losing control. And I think that that's the wrong answer, especially if you're working with a younger group of kids or if you're working with a more neurodivergent group. I think if you're working with those two specific groups, then actually it's exactly the opposite. If you can let go of some of the rules and be a little bit more flexible, slow yourself down, if you can kind of slow everything down and keep it interesting, that's going to help you establish a lot better control, because you'll get their allegiance, which is worth 1,000 times more than their obedience.
That I have like that's personal experience with my teens, because like when I first started running for them at like the beginning of the pandemic, I had known them. I had never run a game for them, but my husband had. And he was like, oh, like they're a little tough sometimes. Like they're kind of, they don't want to play in the rules all the time. They just kind of want to do whatever they want. They're a little like, they'll kind of do whatever. They'll just try to break the game. And I was like, okay, this might be a little tough. But I realized that like pretty quickly that if you just kind of let them, like some of the kids they wanted to tell a story and they had a specific way they wanted to tell it. And they didn't necessarily want to be tied down to the rules. Like you were saying, like they wanted to have that freedom to like make choices. And I basically was like, okay, there's one kid who's just like, he's really like, he's playing this crazy character that is like, he has a bag full of cats that he throws at people. He's starting his own religion. Like he tried to buy like a cathedral in the middle of a town. And I was like, I don't know how much money this is. Like, I can't give you the land price for this cathedral. And I was just like, I'm not going to fight him anymore. I'm just going to let him do it. Like if he wants to pull a cat out of his bag and throw it at someone, sure. It'll do some damage. Fine.
roll a damage, right?
Literally, he was in Roll20 making specific rolls for certain cats. He had them all named, and he would pull them out at random to like do certain things. And it was hilarious. And the other kids loved it, even though they were like really, they weren't necessarily rigid to the rules, but they were like, we know the rules and we want to play with them. But they were just like, he's hilarious. His character is great. And he was like, I want to stop playing this character because he's gotten too crazy for me. And I was like, really? Like, I like him. Like, I think he's doing fine. And he's like, no, he's not that much fun anymore, because like when I built him to kind of like destroy things. And I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I want to play in this world that we've made together. And I was like, it's a breakthrough. Like, oh my God. And then he made a new character, and this character is the total opposite. He's a mute swordsman. He is the last of his kind, and he has this tragic backstory. And that's the character that married the dragon, actually. And now he's like, it's time for me to retire this character, because he has an ending planned out for him. And we've been like texting back and forth between games, like he wrote a whole script that we're going to read when he meets his rival and they have their battle to the death. And then he's like, and I have a new character, and like, this is my plan for him. And I was like, okay, well, like, I know you said that he's like super powerful and kind of immortal. You can do that. It's just that why don't we put like a weird curse on him where he can't use all of his powers to like their total thing. And he was like, yeah, that's what I thought, because I want him to stay with the party and like have an excuse to stay there. And he suddenly turned into like this kid who like will just play. He wants to play in the world, and like anyone else who tries to mess up the world, he like gets angry at now. And it's kind of funny because he was the one who was kind of like, he's the one who's like, no, we have to, guys, like, we can't do anything crazy here. Like, I don't want to do that. But he's also the one marrying the dragon. But like, I love that evolution from him to someone who's like, didn't want to play with the rules into playing within the rules in his own like kind of way. I think it's awesome to see. Like, he's no longer none of them are the problem kid anymore. They're all just like I had to sit down and have a talk with him when he was in another person's game, because he was like actively like trying to destroy the game. And suddenly he's not anymore, because like he has the freedom to do what he wants. And so he has made the choice to play within the rules using that freedom as he sees fit. Like he's like self-policing now. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I would say like in kids games and both adult games, and I know this is not how everyone runs D&D or other type role-playing games, but like the rules are there to facilitate interesting stories.
Mm-hmm.
And the second they stop doing that, I'll change them, I'll tweak them, I'll throw them out. I'm like, I especially if you are paying me to run a game, the rules are not paying me to run this game. You are. So I want to make sure you have a fun time. I don't care if the rules have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
If the rules hate the way I ran this game, I don't care. Like, I don't want the rules to have a fun time. And I think like in the end, we're all just kind of sitting around a table, like, doing a collective improv imagination game, and whatever the rules of that game can change depending on what we need them to be.
Yeah. I mean, that's the joy of it.
I think the only rule I stick hard and fast to is that like 20 is good and 1 is bad. I mean, that's like really.
Yeah, it's a simple rule, and it works.
That rule, they'll be mad at you.
Yeah. Yeah, don't make them fail when they roll a 20.
Sense, it's like my big rule for explaining it to kids is like, if 1 is bad, nothing goes your way, 20 is good, or 6 or whatever number is our highest roll point is good, and everything does go your way, and everything else is in between. And so I think that is the most simple rule that I stick to, and everything else is fluid depending on the players, because there might be some kid who really loves like these esoteric rules from campaign 4 years ago, and their character has this special power, and it makes them feel powerful, because kids play for different reasons. Like some kids love to break the game. They're boundary pushers. They're the kind of kids who want to marry the dragon because they think outside the box, and they like to and they like to troll. They like to make their peers laugh. And then there are some kids who play because they want to feel powerful, because there's something missing in their life, and they want to feel strong, and they want to feel omnipotent. And so they get really angry when things don't go their character's way, because it reminds them of when things don't go their way in real life. And then there are kids who just are like, who are just there to tell a story, and they've come up with their character, and they just want to, like, they want all the bad things to happen to their character because it's good for the story. And you kind of have to balance challenging all those different kinds of players, because in order for the game to work, like, it can't always go player number 2's way, and you can't always give in to player number 1's game breaking, and you can't always like be punishing player number 3. You have to find a way to balance those personalities at the table, and also because it teaches each kid, like you were saying, like dragon marrier kid, he needed to learn that like he could break rules in the game and have it be fun, but also that it would be more fun to follow the story, so it's about using it as a teaching tool, and using it as a way to figure out why each kid is playing as well.
Never be going to be a rule in my game where you can't marry a dragon.
Like one rule in my games, whether it's for kids, teens, or adults, is don't yuck somebody else's yum. If somebody is having fun chatting with the potion maker, don't yuck their yum, don't rush them through it, don't complain.
Don't kill the potion maker.
Don't kill the potion maker.
Yeah.
Then also because it helps, because it's like what you think is fun might make somebody else really upset.
Yeah.
And you don't want to yuck somebody else's yum because you wouldn't want somebody to do that to you. That's a recess program.
Yeah.
That we have in school. Like, don't yuck someone else's yum. You
Yeah.
want to make sure everybody's having fun. You're allowed to have fun. You just have to do it in a way where it's not going to make other people upset, because then it's not going to be fun for more people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be challenging playing with kids, because especially if they're not friends to start with, like if you're playing for like a group of kids after school, or like a library where the kids might just show up and they don't know each other. And so they've got that peer pressure of wanting to look cool for all of the other kids, and also like wanting, not necessarily knowing the boundaries that they have with each player, like if they can tease one player a little bit for something, like, are they going to be fine with it? Or are they going to get upset? And, like what's it, I mean, it's like that with adults too. You don't know what's going to offend someone or anything. So it's better to just kind of,
and then if
hold
you
it
have
back.
kids that are siblings that are all going to the same table, oof.
Yeah, that could be tough.
That's it is.
I know my siblings' boundaries and I want to push them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And sometimes, especially online, like I'm in a different part of the state with a couple of kids that I play with online. And sometimes the siblings that are sitting right next to each other, they will harass each other, and one will get really upset. And I'll say, hey, do you want to take a second and calm down and go do something on your own, and then you can come back? And the other sibling's like, I said I was sorry. I'm like, nah, they gotta forgive you though. It's not up to you whether they accept your apology.
It's not automatic.
It's not automatic. So they might be mad at you for the rest of the game, and that's on you.
Yeah. Like that. I mean, that's sibling pairs, absolutely, or kids that know each other, and like, I mean, it's better if they're friends, but sometimes like kids might not like each other because they're in the same class at school, and this one kid is always showing them up, or he makes fun of him, or he steals his pencils or whatever, like that. And that can be a hard thing to get past. I mean, I think that any role-playing game kind of breeds camaraderie, just because like, your characters are probably being put in a tough situation where they need to rely on each other. And I think that kind of forces the kids to like get along a little bit. But I mean, I've seen cases where characters in the game get angry at each other and the players are yelling at each other, and then the game's over and they're like, okay, we're cool. Like we're not angry at each other. Our characters are angry at each other, but we are not angry at each other. Which is, I mean, that's, I think, a very mature way to think about it. Like, I'm surprised that more kids I know are like that than adults who will get angry about something that someone did in a game, like, and then 3 years ago. And
it'll bleed into.
Oh yeah. And then it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to go over for New Year's because like I don't know if he likes me anymore. And I'm like, you're like almost 40, dude. Like, It's fine. Just say you're sorry. Like, it's fine. But yeah, that is a challenge. But I think that there's kids kind of like, they have this, it's easy for kids to make friends. They don't have all of like the adult hangups that we have. So it's a lot easier 100%. To kind of get them to work together, I think. Let's talk about the talking dragon, Mariah.
Oh, Talking the Dragon right here.
Yes.
So when I first started doing the kids D&D program at the gaming store, I had like about 4 kids to start, and they all knew each other from school, and they all were talking at the same time, and I was starting to get a headache. So I found this guy. This is a toy dragon that I've had since I was a kid. There's a bigger version of this, and I introduced this dragon as Talkie the Dragon. If you are wanting to talk, you need to be holding Talkie the Dragon. While somebody is holding on to Talkie the Dragon, nobody else can speak, and you need to listen to that person because they might have an idea that you didn't think of. They might be saying the same idea you had, and then you don't want to repeat it because, it wastes time. Or maybe they're answering a question or asking a question that you might have had. And what I would use Talkie at the beginning to go over, like, all right, character introductions. Okay, here's the situation. What does each of your characters want to do? And I would just pass it around. And by the time I got back to me, I'd say, okay, so who wants to do what? And gradually, as the kids got older and they, learned the importance of listening to each other and being able to speak your ideas clearly and quickly. I've slowly removed Taki the dragon, and just she kind of hung out on my DM screen and if there was a moment where it was getting loud, I'd be like, okay, we're gonna use her again. And it was a nice little reset moment. I was doing this after school this year until COVID restrictions popped up again. I had didn't have Taki, but one of the kids made out of a sponge a little Among Us character that we named Sussy. And you had to pass Sussy around to do that. Now I just have them raise their hands because we have to sit all apart. But that was a modification that I started once I started to play with kids frequently, because it's a handy tool that we're going to use later.
You can use a giant D20 for that, and then like the D20 was like the manifestation of the player's turn, and like and then they'd have to like pass it to the next person, because I think oftentimes going round in a circle and turn taking is something that the kids are very familiar with. So I'd be like, okay, it's Steve's turn. Steve, what do you want to do during your turn? And then he would roll the dice, and then other kids might be able to chime in, but it was like he was holding the D20, so it's like he's the one who's doing anything.
Yeah, kind of like a decision maker. Like I've seen that used in other things where like one person is like you designate someone as like the party leader, and they're the ones, like everyone else voices their opinion, and then the party leader is the one who like chooses. And there's different ones. There might be a combat leader, and there might be like a social leader, and there might be like a smart leader. And then those are the people, like you can kind of divide it up, and they each have a job to do in the party, and they're the final authority on it. So they each feel like they have their own thing that's like theirs, and everyone else can contribute, but like they're the one. We sometimes do it in my group with like they'll like figure out who's best at like rolling certain things, like, oh, like the warlock has the best arcana roll, so she's going to do the arcana rolls and we're just going to help her. And it kind of becomes a little bit more like, I don't know, it helps them, I think, to think about things in that way. And I think it takes pressure off of the quiet kids to like make their voice known, because I know that's
the quiet kid does need to speak. We do need to make sure that the quiet kid talks.
Exactly. Yeah. And like I know because I run most of my games online, especially with the kids at least. I think like one of the problems with not doing like video and voice is that you can't see when someone's getting ready to talk. And it's harder to like get those visual cues of like, hey, like this person definitely wants to say something. They're like leaning forward and they're ready to go. And when you're just doing voice, it's harder to kind of figure that out. So I think that it's helpful to like, for me as a DM, like I sometimes have to remind myself to be like, I heard two people trying to talk there. Like first it's going to be Jack, and then it's going to be Steve, and then it's going to be John. And like, that's like, and I'll just go to them one by one to say what they want to say, and then they can kind of keep talking. So I mean, I think that can sometimes be a unique challenge of playing online, but I think it's a challenge you have to deal with, at least running for kids. Let's go to some of those wonderful questions that Arthur's player asked. How to step out from the parent role and enjoy the game like an equal player with my kids. So like, how do you teach a parent and a kid to play together when the parent is used to being like the authority and the kid is used to listening to what their parent wants to do? Like, how do you facilitate that change in relationship in game?
I think you have to have agreement and understanding before you start to play. I think that you know, sitting down and just saying like, all right, we're going to change it up a little bit, and checking in with the parent and finding out if they're okay with that role reversal. Consent is important, right? Because I think that sometimes in some family dynamics, you've got people who have a really hard time letting go of their role, right? So before I go into a session with a family, I would want to talk with the parents first, and I would want to say, like, what are you looking to get out of it? What are the things that you're worried might happen? What are some concerns that you have that might come up? Just kind of checking in with them and letting them know how you play. Listen, you know, I hope everybody can have a good time. I like to switch things up a little bit. I like to make it a little bit fun. I'm gonna I might put you in a position of, having to take direction from your kid. How do you think that they would handle it? So having that, like doing that brief beforehand is going to be really important to successfully being able to pull it off.
Yeah.
And then I think, if the parents are to it, it is cool to put the kid in a leader position and the parent subordinate position of some sort or other, right? Like the kid in the knight position and the parent in the squire position.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I find myself doing that with myself when I'm playing with people who are not as like knowledgeable of the system. Like I'll be like, I know how to make a character. I know how to play this game, but I don't want to be the one who's making the decision for you guys because it's your game first. Like you guys should play the game you want to play. And like, I have 3 other games that I can play in this week that I can be the leader in. So like, I'll take a back seat to that, but be there for like advice and all that kind of stuff.
If you're a parent that's like worried that like your kid is like gonna mess up or is struggling with something, like remembering that like that's what the dungeon master is here for. Like we are here to be a lot of things, but also the authority. And like let yourself relax. Let yourself you have asked this dungeon master to run a game for you. I assume you trust them at least that much. So like trust that they've got it. If your kid is struggling, they'll step in, or perhaps not, and like let them, like it's okay to struggle. If your kid is struggling with something, they're going to go through it. They're going to struggle and they'll be on the other side, and you can be there as a comrade.
Yeah. It's good sometimes to remind the parent that they don't always have to be the disciplinarian, that this is an opportunity for them to just connect, to just have fun. You'll be the disciplinarian, you'll handle it. And there's always the timeout. If things get to be too uncomfortable for any one person in the game, anybody can call a timeout.
Yeah. I've actually played D&D with my mother. I ran a game for her and Kristen and Kristen's mom, and some of their other retired age female friends. And I was very, very nervous when I first started, like the first game, because my mother had never played D&D before. She had never really said she had an interest. We were just like, hey, this is a cool idea we have. Would you play with us? And she was like, sure, I just don't know how to play. And I was nervous because I was like, I don't want to have to tell my mom no, or like direct her on how to do something. Like I'll help her, but I was like, I had this whole hurdle I had to get over, like of like, this is my mom, this is like I love her, and we have like we're friends as well as like relatives, but like I don't really know how to like tell her like, well, you can't really do that, like let's think of another way to do that, and be that authority figure to her of like the final arbiter. It was nerve-wracking at first. Like we got used to it, but it was nerve-wracking for a while. So coming from the other side of that, being a child DMing for their parents, not necessarily playing with them, but it is nerve-wracking. So it's good to see that like this advice has been very helpful, I think, to kind of get back on that equal level and say like, okay, like this is where the game is, and you might be here in real life, but like we're going to bring everyone to the same kind of place when we're playing together. One of the other ones on here was how do you like this? I really like this one. How do you defend against appeals for advice or help from your kids when you believe that they can handle it on their own, and that they're mature enough to kind of make these decisions or figure this thing out? And how do you do that without losing that like trust that they have for you to like help them and be that authority?
I think giving them like a little reminder, like if a kid's like, I don't know what to do, what should I do? You'd be like, well, what are some things that you are able to do? Let's take a look at your character sheet. What are some things you are able to do? And have them physically like read it out and explain it and be like, okay, which of those do you think would be best? And really it can start it and like I do this with teaching. So I'll have a kid like, I can't do this. I'm like, okay, well, what are something that you can do? And have them work their way up until they're able to do that thing on their own.
Being it's positive,
it's okay to like help them. I understand wanting to like be able to play and stuff too. But like if I'm a little kid and I have a person who I don't know very well running a game, of course I'm going to look to my parent to be like, what should I do? Because you know, you have to build that level of comfort with that person who's running the game. Yep. So even just slowly being like, okay, well, what's on your character sheet? What can you do? What are some powers that you have? What do you think would be helpful in this situation? And I do that when I teach. I also, when with kids, especially because I'm most of my tables that I run, it's kids and teens, like, and that's it. So I will say, well, this is the situation. What do you think your character would want to do? Do you want to listen to other people and see what they're doing first? And give them the opportunity, give them that option to sit back and just listen and think about it. And letting them know that it's okay if you decide not to do anything. It's okay if you want to just step back. That's totally fine.
Yeah, I help kids a lot out with their homework, and I do similar things to what you were saying, where they ask me a question and they're like, oh, like it's 5 times 7. What is that? And I'm like, a lot of the times I do simple things like, well, what do you think it is? Or I'll be like, okay, well, it's 5 7 times. What do you think 5 7 times is? Like rephrase the question kind of thing. So I think that's actually a great way to think about it. Like if you are a parent in a situation where your kid wants your help, how do you help them with homework? Do you just tell them the answer? I assume you don't just give them the answer when they ask you. And I think you can do it in a similar way in a Dungeons and Dragons games. You can help them towards the answer. You can reflect it back on them. There's lots of different options. I say whatever you're comfortable with when you help them with homework might be a good way. Try to reframe that in a D&D setting and see what you get.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think that as a parent, so taking my therapy hat off and speaking as a parent, I think that sometimes it can be hard because it can be hard to manage all of the different pressures that you're feeling. The pressure to keep the game on track, the pressure to get this kid over whatever hurdle that they're facing, the pressure to make sure that everyone's having a good time. And oh my gosh, we're spending so much time on Alex's like whatever. Or I think that all of those pressures can be really hard for the parent to do a good intervention all of the time. I actually think that this is something that I think this is something that you could easily talk about with the parent, because I think it would be great for the DM to step in and become the person who does what they need to do. Sorry, I got distracted. The DM can actually help parent out in a lot of ways. The DM can cast the parent's character just ate a mushroom and it caused them to completely lose their voice and they can't say anything. Or something like that, some kind of magical, the parent can't talk move. Or the can also offer an opportunity, like, hold on, wait a second, before, like, come back here. Why don't we're going to create a space for the next few minutes where you can do anything and it won't have any, just you throw out whatever you want to try to do, even just think outside the box. What is the craziest thing you can think of to do in this moment and account for anything? We're just going to see how it plays. We're going to practice it. It's this space, this kind of like a no space with no gravity where you can do anything. And by doing that, you as the DM can kind of give that parent some both relief from having to be that person and give that kid an opportunity to address the anxiety and fear that they're experiencing and kind of over the hurdle, right?
Yeah. Evan, this is your specialty, but working with kids with special needs or neurodivergent kids or even neurodivergent adults, what's some advice for running games for them or for playing games with them? And GMs, what is your advice for doing that if you have experience with that? I think probably all of us have dealt with a game involving a neurodivergent kid at one point. So take it away, whoever wants to talk.
Well, I think we've talked about a lot of different things already, a lot of different adaptations, like being able to not cling so desperately to the rules, right? I think it is so important to be flexible, because if you may be working with kids that don't have any awareness of where they're at or what they're doing or how it's going to impact the dynamics of the group. And it's a really good opportunity if you can be flexible in your thinking to help them learn a little flexibility in their thinking. Or like I said, being aware and reflecting back, oh, wow, so this is what I hear you're going to do. I wonder how everybody else would feel about that. I think that, I could see how the NPCs might be a little upset about that. Are we sure that's what we're, right? And just kind of reflecting back some of the likely outcomes to them, maintaining your flexibility as a DM is the single most important thing that you can do. I think the other thing that is really important is being aware of what kind of things your players might struggle with. And again, I go back to doing the brief beforehand, asking the questions. What are the things that you need to get out of the game? What are you hoping to get out of the game? What do you think you might struggle with? What are some ways that I would help you with that?
Yeah. I know at least with when we were running Quest and those games that are specifically as kind of social helpers for kids, I know that one of the things that I wasn't doing in the beginning because I was used to playing a little more freeform, but that I ended up doing was giving the kids choices and saying okay, if you're having, because sometimes, even neurotypical people will get kind of paralyzed by indecision. And just basically being okay, here's the situation. Here are 3 options that you have, or you could think of another one if you want to. But you could follow this person. You could try to hide and wait for them, or you could just to start asking people about around if they've seen anything interesting. And I think that is very helpful because a lot of neurodivergent kids are very rigid, and they like that idea of having choices. Like a number, 3 choices that they can choose between without having to kind of think of it on their own, because that is, that's difficult for, I think, everyone sometimes to think of a good solution to something. I know there's been several times in games that I've been playing in where I've sat there and I'm I need to figure out what to do. And I don't know. And I've told the GM, I don't know what to do. I know nothing I can think of is a good solution for this problem. So what do you think I should do? And that's when they would give me choices as well. And I think that's helpful, especially for younger kids and for anyone of any age that's neurodivergent.
I used to teach mostly games to neurodivergent kids. And I think one thing to really take awareness of is whether or not this kid is a lawful kid, or if this kid is a neutral kid, or if this kid is a chaotic kid. And I love the alignment in D&D, because I think it does sort of line up with different ways that we as people present ourselves. I think with a lawful kid, those are kids who are real sticklers for the rules, who have read the rule book 4 times and might know it better than you, who are going to get ridiculously angry at other kids for breaking the rules. And then the chaotic kids, it's the opposite. They don't care about the rules. They want to have fun, and they're going to break the game if it's more fun than playing the game. And then with the neutral kids, sometimes those are the kids who will sit in the sidelines and just say, well, I don't know. And you have to find a way to balance all of those personalities at the table. And that is a real challenge. So you have to be able to be confident enough with a lawful kid to say, no, it's not your turn. So you can't really decide what he's doing right now. And you have to be able to be confident enough with a chaotic kid to be and then, okay, if you jump into a waterfall made of acid, your character will die, because all of the acid will fall off of his all of the acid will cover your skin, and then you will die. And for a kid, like you said, who may not have the words to or the confidence to be able to say, I want to do this, then presenting the options or saying, well, you could do this or you could do this, but it's up to you and you can decide, and it's your turn now, so you get to talk. And being able to be no, sorry, chaos, it's not your turn. No, sorry, law, it's not your turn. It's neutral's turn to talk.
Yeah.
And being able to like kind of enforce whose turn it is and what's happening, and be confident in your own storytelling and your own world. And I think that can be where like the magic really happens too, because then you find the chaotic kid like who's marrying the dragon, and you find the kid who is like learning how to use their voice. I mean, that's really and it's a good thing to do, because when you know what kind of personalities you have at the table, you're really more able to manage those personalities.
Yeah, knowing the kids and like getting to know them, I think that is probably the best advice that can be said. Once you know these kids, then it'll be a lot easier to know.
And if you don't know them, it's just observation. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
And sitting back and just listening to them interact with each other, you're able to figure out who's who pretty quick.
Yeah. It's kind of weird that way. The benefit of being an adult looking at teenagers, I guess, is it's very weird that you can really see like the friendships. We're gonna wrap this up. I'll wrap it up with I guess a little bit of promotion of our new stuff that we're doing. Right now, you lovely people watching can sign up for games of one of the new D&D modules, Wild Beyond the Plate. It is a fae adventure involving carnivals and hags and unicorns and pretty much everything else you could ever want out of a fairy adventure. It's amazing. And you can play with some of the GMs here and some of our other GMs. Yes, Mariah, Arthur. And
you can practice that.
Exactly. And it's a lot of fun. If you have not ever played D&D before, this is a great time to start. You can email our lovely adventure specialist, Kaylee. She will most likely have this down in whatever description is down there. The other thing I want to talk about is for a long time when Mastermind was a much smaller in-person company, we used to every year do this thing called Eagle's Claw, which was the Eagle's Claw School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It's a like Wizarding World LARP for kids and teens, starting at 10 and going till about 18 or 17 maybe. And it is, due to the pandemic, we couldn't do it for the past few years. And now we are starting a kind of like an online version of that. We're going to be doing a all-day event to kind of kick it off. And then it's going to be done through sessions of D&D. So we're using the Strixhaven rules. That is another source book that just came out for D&D 5th edition. And we've made some adjustments, and Sarah's drawn a lovely map of the grounds, and we're very excited about it. So that will be coming very soon. I think that's about it for us tonight. So I realized I forgot to introduce myself in the beginning, but I am Alex Lentic. I'm Mastermind's Master of Lore. Let's go around. Start with Sarah.
Well, I'm really happy to have participated in this roundtable. I feel like hopefully people who are interested in running games for kids can sort of see the educational value of using stories and imagination to teach all kinds of things, from social skills to history to science to business to anything really. It's just about how much you want to use your imagination to create a world for your students to play in.
Awesome. Evan, do you have any final words?
This kind of role playing is so incredibly important and valuable. You know, if there are therapists out there that are thinking about using this in their social skills groups or in individual or group therapies with their kids, it's fantastic. The amount of growth that you can get kids drawn into the narrative aspect of it is just phenomenal. So
awesome. Arthur, final thoughts?
I'll just say, if you're interested in being able to be a peer with your child and like run a game or be in a game together, I would be so excited to run that for you. And if you're worried that your kid might like the D&D rules, there's a lot of rules. I don't know all of them. Don't tell anyone. If you're worried that your kid that might be a bit overwhelmed by that, we run a lot of other tabletop role-playing games that rules are more streamlined and easier to understand for kids. So if you, we do free 15-minute consultations where we can talk with you about what you're looking for and what your kid would be interested in and what kind of system might be best for them.
Yes, awesome. Mariah, final thoughts.
One of my favorite things about running games for younger people is that they get to experience something that I absolutely love and didn't get to really participate in until I was older, until I was out of college. And it's really refreshing to see what they do during those games, with whether they have a ton of knowledge about how the rules work, or if they have zero idea of how the rules work and they're just winging it and doing what they want to do. Because if anything, it reignites that passion that I have for these types of games, and to be able to share that with the next generation, it's one of the best things that I can do, and I love it. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. And thank you everyone for watching. We will see you on the next Mastermind Roundtable. Bye-bye.
Bye.